Alrighty, we are back on this edition of Side Retired, the MLB podcast. It is Dylan and Jack as always. And today, as we've advertised, we have a very special guest with us, Derek Marques of Lakeridge Sports Management. He is an MLB certified agent. So, Jack, Derek, how are you guys doing today?
I can't complain. Yourselves?
All
No,
good.
fantastic.
All right. So for all of you baseball fans, we're going to get into what it's like to be an MLB agent, sort of the process of becoming an agent, and everything to do with that. As this is a unique and fun experience that we're having, getting to interview Derek for the next 20 minutes or so. So Jack, how about you kick us off with any questions you have to ask Derek?
So first, I guess we'll start with your upbringing. You're just wondering, like, how you're, it takes a process to get certified. What do you think that entailed? What do you have to do? Any qualification you previously needed, and just like how that process of a whole. Can you just like describe and detail any aspects of it?
Yeah. So to be certified with the Major League Baseball Players Association, first step is you have to fill out an application, um, which then they will run a background check, and there's a fee with the application. Once the application is approved, you are now approved to write the agent exam. And then once you pass the agent exam, you're still not certified. I think for me, it comes with the hardest part is you have to represent a player on a 40-man roster within 3 years of passing the exam. And if you do not do that, you have to start everything over again. And once you are certified, like myself, you cannot go 4 consecutive years without representing a player on the 40-man roster, or else you lose your certification.
Sounds good. So obviously lots of hard work. And then sort of what is the process of finding clients? Is it sort of just you have to have connections in the industry, or is it, how do you sort of find guys throughout that whole process?
Well, it depends. If it's you're starting your own company, like I did, right? It's just going out there, realizing you have to take on younger players, take on players that may have kind of been rejected, and kind of going through independent ball of the different avenues. If you're with an established company, it's probably a lot easier because they'll just assign you with a player on a 40-man. You get your certification that way. But definitely, it's, to me, I think every player needs an agent. It's an advocate. It's someone kind of not necessarily, to help you in minor league baseball. Kind of, yes, you got to communicate with the organization, but what happens if you lose your job tomorrow? Right? Releases happen all the time. Then what?
So we're just wondering. So this seems like there's like a competitive aspect of it, because like there's a hard deadline for you to you have to get a 40-man guy by this point after passing the exam. So can you just talk about what that, any kind of added pressure from that, and if you've been if you've landed a client like that, could you explain like what it did, and if not, what that search process might entail?
Well, I kind of leaned on the first aspect, because when I first joined, I was part of another agency, and they had a player on the 40-man roster. So I negotiated his major league deal back in, I think, fall of 2017, if I recall. So then in the 2018 season, when he got, when he made the 40-man roster, he started in the minor leagues. I kind of got my certification there. So I got mine fairly quickly, but it definitely is stressful because, if you're young and you're starting, with no clients, you're not going to get a client that goes from A ball to a 40-man roster in 3 years, right? And if you are, you're lucky, because so many players don't.
Sounds good. So then obviously you probably had the ability to maybe go into one of those pre-existing agent companies, become another agent in one of those, but you decided to make your own company and sort of start building by yourself. So how did you end up making that decision of you wanted to own Lakeridge Sports Management as opposed to joining one of those bigger brand agencies?
So the agency that I was with, the agent that I was with, was facing tax evasion. So I kind of felt like it was best for my reputation, right? Because as I was still trying to make my own name and my own brand, I didn't want that association. So in May of 2018, we launched Lakeridge Sports Management. At that time, I was still representing players for multi-sport. And then I kind of looked in the mirror and said, looking at the top agents in the world, they only focus on one sport, right? George Mendes in European soccer. You're looking at Scott Boras in baseball. You're looking at Don Meehan in hockey. Rich Paul in basketball. They just strictly focus on one sport. So why am I trying to go against the grain and doing multiple sports? So I focused on just baseball at that point. I was already certified. I already had a good amount of clients in baseball. I kind of joke around and say it's the only sport that I can, leave the cold winter of Canada in March and go to spring training in Florida and Arizona. But on the other hand, it is also the only sport that you go to one location or two locations and have an opportunity to see every player you work with, right? You're an NFL agent or an NHL agent or an NBA, you're constantly, going to different places because they're never in one place. So that was also a perk for myself as well. And so to me, it was quite easy to go with baseball, and I'm happy I did.
And then kind of segue into like the next part. We were just wondering, because you talked about how you negotiated that contract for the Tampa Bay's right player. Is there like any, because it seems like there's a broad scope of what an agent can entice, especially if you're working under a specific firm. Is there any aspect of the whole, whether it's arbitration, free agency, anything in general that you particularly specialize in, or an area that you find is, a strength that you play to, and if so, like what makes that, a particular strong suit for you?
Since I run my own company, I pretty much have to have my hand in all aspects. So at this point, with the experience I've had, it's more along the lines of the draft, getting players kind of into affiliated ball if they get released. And every contract you negotiate, doesn't matter if it's for $1,000 or $1 million. You're adding more zeros. So any contract you can negotiate in that experience. So in that regards, but where I'm at, I kind of spend more time helping players with the draft, and also younger players that happen to get released or not get drafted and get back into affiliate. As my players are still, majority of them now are probably sitting in AA. But I'm constantly working with players, with the draft that's coming up in a month or so.
So obviously having a lot of different clients, definitely you have to divide your time up among sort of every individual player, making sure each of them are satisfied and happy with everything going on. Is that sort of a tough thing to manage, especially when you're sort of the one guy running it all, sort of making sure that everything is working smoothly, or is it not sort of?
It depends if you're organized or not. I'm extremely organized. So for me, it's breaking up your clients based on, okay, I'm going to talk to my AAA guys, tomorrow my AA, tomorrow, you just break them up. So you're dealing with 5 or 10 a day, opposed to all of your clients in one day. I kind of joke around and say the only day I really talk to every client is Christmas Day.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I just wondered, because you mentioned some of your guys in AA, anyone you think we should be looking out for based on who you've seen and anyone that's caught your eye who you currently represent?
So probably my top prospect, I would probably say, is Dane Myers. He was a 6th-round pick with the Tigers. He's been bouncing between AA and AAA this season. So he's never played higher than high A going into the season. He's an interesting story because he was drafted at Rice University as a position player, but he was a 2A player. And then the Tigers kind of tried to convert him to a pitcher. And then just recently, probably years now, probably 2020, 2021, they kind of started putting him back as a position player. So, he's shown power, and I feel that he will be playing for the Tigers in 2023.
Sounds good, and fingers crossed that happens. And I guess sort of with that whole scenario, does the agent play any part in sort of deciding or helping the player decide on, should I be a position player? Should I be a pitcher? Is that sort of organization tells you what to do?
The organization tells you. The only time that we're kind of still talking about it is when they're probably in high school.
Yeah.
Right. Should I focus on being a pitcher? Should I focus on being a position player? So that's that aspect. But when it comes to the draft and kind of someone's in the system, it's the org that determines if the player is going to be, a pitcher or a position player. Now you're seeing more and more 2A players. So I think it's me a matter of time till you see more of those.
Sounds good. And then I guess, yeah, Jack, you got anything more?
I was just curious because I think there's lots of technicalities with this in terms of how agents are allowed to talk to players, and especially at the high school age in terms of NCAA. Is that like any kind of struggle, or is there any kind of like tight trip wire you got to watch out for in terms of
Well,
like,
any player that is an amateur, I'm not their agent, I'm their advisor. So totally different responsibilities. It's not a contractual agreement, and I'm not there for the player. I'm a family advisor. So I can help the parents, right? Because parents have questions, players have questions. In that regard, we're helping players get into colleges, right? So it's more than just the draft. I'm helping a player determine, do I go to junior college? Do I go to a D1 school, right? Do I go to a D1 school that I may not play for 2 years? Or is it better to go to a mid-major? So, when you're dealing with younger players, it's more than just the draft. It's kind of setting them up to succeed, and, putting them in the right situation. But, we have players right now we're working with that are in the draft portal, right? We have not the draft portal, the transfer portal, right? We have players that are in JUCO trying to find D1 scholarships. There's so much more that we do than just, the pro side and the agent side.
Sounds good. And then I guess another thing that I had to ask was, so on your end as an agent for people graduating out of college or in that area that would want to get into the baseball industry, do you have any advice for prospective agents or people coming out of college that would want to enter the baseball field? Any pieces of advice that you would want to give them with all of your knowledge?
It's very competitive. I got into it, I was 36, 37. You look at Scott Boras, he was around that same age. So it's definitely not a young man's game, because you do have to kind of have those life experiences as well as just kind of knowing the industry, right? So it's kind of where I aspect is, it's a goal, get that experience, work with, existing agents, get your foot in the door, or even, you're working in other financial or business settings that kind of help you mature in the workplace, right? And in the business environment that will make you a better agent down the road, right? Just because you're not an agent, 2 weeks after graduation doesn't mean you're a failure.
Sounds good. And then I think the last question that one of our listeners asked us to ask, and it's okay if you don't have one, but he said, what is the craziest story as an agent that you've had a request from any clients? Is there anything that jumps off the top of your mind or nothing?
Well, not necessarily clients, but I've been asked questions when talking to players to potentially represent, right? I've been asked what concert tickets I can get them. I had one player ask me how much money I would pay them. Like, that's not really how it works. So that's definitely, and to me, those are red flags to players that I don't want to work with.
Yeah.
Right. I want to work with a player that wants to have that help and doesn't look to an agent to be, their sugar daddy.
Yeah.
Right. To me, if a player, leaves me and says, that agent's going to buy me this and you did it. And it's like, well, if your girlfriend ever said it, nothing against you, bring her that guy because he buys some better gifts. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, Jack, unless there's anything you else have to add, I think Mr. Marques or Derek, we definitely appreciate your time and all of the insight that you've given over these past 15 minutes about what it's like to be an MLB agent, and wish you nothing but the success with Lakeridge. And we really hope to see your top prospects approaching the major leagues relatively soon. And we'll definitely keep our eye out for all of your guys. So unless there's anything else you have to add.
No, thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much. We hope you guys enjoyed this edition of Side Retired, the MLB podcast. And with that, the side is retired.